Welcome to the Soul Surgery Podcast. My name is Nikki Clinch, and I am your host. I am a maturation facilitator, teacher and coach, integrative holistic health counselor, breathwork facilitator, and author. I am the founder of the Academy of Maturation Coaching, the Alchemy of Being, where I train as many people as I can to become powerful spaces for human beings to come home to their authentic truth. Maturation is a powerful evolutionary process of dissolving trauma, breaking free of stuck patterns, and growing and healing at the taproot. Growing out of who we thought we were from the stories led by our past conditioning in order to grow and evolve into who we were born to be. In this podcast, I will be sharing many different things with you, opening up the doorways to my coaching sessions where you can witness with your own eyes how trauma contaminates our reality and how we can dissolve it, heal it at the root, and rewrite the story of our lives, reclaiming our power and reminding each one of us that who we are is wholeness. I will be interviewing some of the world's most prominent teachers in spirituality, healing, transformation, and human evolvement, and sharing with you my own teachings and learnings along the way. And above all, sharing with you my heart. The purpose of this podcast is to remind each one of you who you really are, to open up the doorway to a new possibility, to a new paradigm, to healing, health, transformation, and our evolvement as individuals and a species. So I hope you enjoy today's episode. One thing that you can do for me, if you find this podcast useful and if you love it, please do subscribe. And if you feel called to, leave a review, because reviews really matter. They help to spread the word and help to spread this podcast to as many people as we can. And lastly, if you have any big aha moments, any shifts, any insights in any of these episodes, please do share it with me. Share with me which episode it was, where in the episode it happened, and how it has impacted you and your life. So without further ado, let's get going. I hope you enjoy today's episode on the Soul Surgery Podcast. Hello, welcome to Soul Surgery Podcast. I am so happy and deeply honored to be sitting here with you, Jaiya John. Thank you so much for coming to meet with me. So, how are you today?
I'm wonderful, Nikki. I appreciate the honor of being with you in this moment. Thank you for reaching out to me initially. Um, I'm good today. I feel like I have my health. I have a roof. Um, able to eat. I feel, I'm blessed. I'm blessed. My heart is very much with, other souls in the world these days. So, I feel that I personally am very fortunate and been looking forward to joining you in your wonderful energy.
Oh, thank you. I felt really honored when you said yes when I invited you to come and speak with me, because I know that you don't do that often. But your words, when I first stumbled across your words, I think it must have been in April. I just feel like you speak directly to the soul and you speak from the soul. And I really recognize where you're speaking from, that stirring the soul to remember itself. That's what your work is about. And I heard it and I was like, oh, I feel like I need to sit with this being. I feel like I need to sit with you. So thank you for saying yes to that. So when I was doing some research and just learning more about you, firstly reading your incredible new book, Freedom. I mean, did you write that for the time we're in right now, or was that just coincidence?
Oh yeah. So I feel everything is purposeful. And it was actually last year about this time that I really began birthing it. It really, I refer to the experience of bringing a book into the world as a birth process. And
Yes.
I don't, as we in giving birth don't necessarily dictate the timeline of that new life coming through. And it was about this time last year, and the world was so very different. I remember driving out to Joshua Tree, which is a desert national park in California, and I'm often drawn to the desert and to the wilderness for contemplation and just washing my spirit clean and just becoming that vessel. And I was going out there a lot last August and September, and Spirit was just bringing through all this truth, all this voice, and at the time, I did recognize that the book that was coming through me was was the one that had been growing in me my entire life. You know, this was
Mhm.
the 15th book ultimately that I've been fortunate to publish, but this was the one that really carried the essence of what I've always known that I'm here for, which is to really address freedom in the world, um,
Mm.
freedom of the soul, freedom in the context of oppression, and that was on my heart as a small child. That was on my heart always, and it just continued to grow and marinate in me. And just this was the time, and I recognized last year, okay, it's coming out, so it must be ready. It must be that time. And it was about a 9 month birthing process, and that was completed in April. So this was weeks before George Floyd's death, murder in here in the United States. And and so at that point, I did recognize not only was the biological pandemic occurring in the world with coronavirus, but at that point it did dawn on me that without my human understanding, it was very intentional and purposeful that the book would come into the world at this time because the book is a message of freedom, of supremacy, inferiority, of
Yes.
the root that is fear and what that does to a human being. It is a story of dehumanization and
Yes.
rehumanization. And so, yes, I did once it was actually in the world recognize, okay, wow, this is why it had to come now. But last year at this time, I was just grateful and humbled and awed at what was pouring through me because it was a very strong and vast and ancient river. And I could feel all the grain of it, the sediment, the sand. I could feel the I could feel the water. I could feel the weight and the generations. And I was crying a lot. I was just in the desert crying a lot.
Yes.
Just grateful. And I was feeling as though, okay, now if we can never know how long we have the blessing of being alive and drawing breath, but I do feel like if this is to be my final offering, I'm just so grateful to
Mm.
be alive, to have this come through me. And
Yes.
so I really appreciate your words about the book. For me, it is it's an ancestral voice and it's a prayer.
Yes.
It's a prayer and it's a prayer answered at the same
Yes.
time.
Yeah, as I was reading it, the first half of the book, it feels like digging deep into the roots of the shadow, the absolute roots of separation and the trauma of oppression. And as I was reading it, it just it was moving through my body, like waking it up, like wake up. And you have this remarkable gift of being able to speak such love and such sort of core shadow at the same time, like look at the truth. And when I there was some words that you wrote that I wrote down here. We oppress our own selves. This affects how we treat, sorry, the world oppresses us, then we oppress our souls, and then we oppress the world. And when I read that, I was like, that's the invitation of what we are being asked to face right now in humanity.
Yes, I feel this. I feel this deeply. It's what has for a soul like me brought on such profound exhaustion these days and weeks and months is because we are in the dying and we are in the birthing all at once. I those words about oppression, the world oppresses us, then we oppress our soul, and then we oppress the world. That was not poetic imagination from me. That was the voice of truth as I lived it. And so it was testimony, growing up as a child, um, very deeply etched by racism, prejudice,
Mhm.
bigotry, ignorance, stigma, stereotype, not just related to race, but in my case, related to my circumstance, being born an orphan, in the desert. And so it it was a whole childhood of me being oppressed and then originating a story or a multiplicity of stories within my mind and my being about that oppression until the point where the stories became fables I was telling myself day and night, and those fables were self-oppressing. So first I suffered the lash of the slave master, the
Mhm.
enslaver, and the collective enslaver, the culture, the society, the global humanity, the enslaver. Then I picked up the lash, which is what happens when we
You're
are
able to
deeply
receive.
harmed and traumatized. I picked up the lash from the dust and began to lash myself and became good at it, became very good at it, which is dangerous. Self destruction, self rejection, self hatred, self harm. Yes. And then all of that self harmfulness spilled over my perimeter, and I began to oppress the world in a way that was very foreign to my true nature. I even recognized it in the moment. And, I was young at that age, teens, let's say, when I really began to, be an oppressor, be a harmful presence, even though I was overflowing with love. The pain in me had transmuted into hurtfulness and harmfulness. Not in a way where most people would notice it. It wasn't like that. I was still trying to be that good little black boy, indigenous
Mhm.
boy. But I think that really mattered to me to be, gaining the approval of others. But I was in great pain, and so to be oppressed, to self oppress, and then to oppress back into the world. I'm intimately acquainted with what that journey feels like and looks like. And so I have spent my whole life caring about that, maybe more than anything. As a living thing on this earth with other living things, I behold and see within them, see through the surface what is going on with the soul. And like you said earlier, when recognizing the amnesia that many of us carry as to who we
Mhm.
truly are and what this world truly is, my
Mhm.
heart, my heart cries out, and I want to bring memory. I want to bring remembrance for
Yes.
such souls that they may see themselves in a divine and sacred light and a mirror of truth, a reflection in the water they can look into and see, okay, I have been swept so far from myself by
Mhm.
this pain.
Mhm.
I'm so far from the shore. I'm just out in the ocean drowning and dying. But I want some part of me wants to return home, wants to swim back to the shore. And so
Yes.
this is my life. This is my work. That's how I can best describe it.
Well, it's exceptionally important work. And, you know, when the murder of George Floyd happened, it was like the world was being smacked in the face with truth. And people like myself, I had to start looking deep inside myself. I'm a brown woman, but I was living like I was white. And I had to look deep inside of myself at the shame from my own mother's um, oppression of her own brown skin, taught from her ancestors, and how I was being racist towards myself and then bringing that out in the world. And I didn't even know it until I was smacked in the face. And it was like, you speak about it in your book. It's like being washed in truth, like truth is acid, but it's a necessary bath to have. And when I was able to be with the shame that I carried in my own self, I realized that the healing, it wasn't about me going and changing everything out there. I had to bring back to wholeness the parts of myself that are in separation and feeding that separation. And I see that that is the gift and the invitation of where we are. We are being faced with so much shadow in the world. And the answer is not about changing the systems, but healing ourselves. Yes, that's what I hear you speak about.
Yes, thank you. I'm emotional listening to you say those words. I just yesterday recorded for a client a state organization in the United States, um, public service organization. I just recorded a talk for them, and that was the current that kept running through me over and over again. We continue to look externally for salvation and saviors in the form of a guru, in the form of a teacher or a speaker or someone with a book or a so-called influencer. Um, in social media, right? In our professional arenas, we look to trainings and say, well, we need to get the training to address diversity and equity and inclusion and this and this. All of these are cultural tactics embedded in our DNA for avoiding the one work that will release us from this long, ancient, ancestral suffering. And that work is the gardening of the soul, the inner soil in us. And we see this over and over again, each of us running away from that interior garden, running away
Mm-hmm.
through substance abuse, through self-harm, through shame and guilt, as you mentioned, right?
Mm-hmm.
Through hate, through conflict with others, social conflict, intergroup friction and antagonism, and blame. We blame others of other categories, social categories, but we have the hardest time looking inward with love because what we tend to do is we judge ourselves, we beat ourselves up, we punish ourselves, we do oppress. And so it's hard for us when we think, oh, I need to look inside and work on myself. That's not a pleasant thought for most people because they associate that with pain and suffering to look inside.
Yes.
But it's only a painful experience when we go inside in a way that is punitive and
Yes.
judgmental.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yes.
so, yeah. And you mentioned the shadow, that is upon us and within us. I feel it is very much so. And if we pay attention, there are so many manifestations right now of that shadow of the and when night befalls the day, when night comes and things grow dark, I've always thought of that period of time as a womb. It's a womb.
Mm-hmm.
It is dark, yes, as is the womb, but so much beauty and blessing and profound creation happens in that womb. So much restitution can be made. And so maybe we are now in a season on earth as humans of learning how to live as other living things do, where we grow peace inside and are in relation with the shadow, with the darkness, with the ugliness, with the night, with the things that terrify us.
Mm-hmm.
We are as humans, well, the more as humans we move away from our indigenous way of being, which is our original way of being, the
Mm-hmm.
more disconnected and separated we are from that shadow self. And so we are
Yes.
just a creature out of balance. We
Yes.
are just out of balance. And we're being more than nudged forced really, right? Forced, right? Like that. You mentioned that slap. Like we're really being kicked and prodded, and like forcefully moved in that continuum, that pendulum back toward the center. Um, the center, between feeling like we always need to be dwelling in light and comfort.
Mhm.
Comfort is a castle that keeps oppressors in their place and keeps
Yes.
oppression in its place. Comfort is also a plantation or a reservation that keeps the slaves, the enslaved, in their place. And so
Yes.
for all of us, we struggle because we don't want to not feel comfort in our day.
Yes.
We're beat up. We're beat up. We're bruised. We're exhausted. And so we do want this modicum of comfort at least. And the thing is that we have to be careful about our relationship with comfort
Mhm.
if we want to heal.
Yes. When I asked you what topic you wanted to talk about today, you suggested, or it came to you, that our stories are our heart's greatest medicine. And when I sat with that and I allowed that to sink in, I just hear everything that we're speaking about is that actually it's in the avoidance and the detachment and the turning away from our stories that is feeding and continuing the separation and the suppression that we've been living in as a species. That the only way to heal is to get into the roots of where we have come from. Can you speak a bit more about your roots? Like, what you said, it's your ancestry that led you to this work. Can you share a bit more about your story and how that's been your medicine?
Yeah, thank you, Nikki, for the invitation. Um, so my journey has very much been one of separation. The Persian poet from the 13th century, Rumi, Jalaluddin Rumi, whose spirit and voice has always very deeply reverberated with me. He spoke of the separation song, the sorrow song that the river reed sang because it was experiencing and recognizing its separation. And I believe that fundamentally separation, psychologically, physically, emotionally, spiritually, from from the union that is all things, is at the root of our pain for all of us. Separation from true union, not actual separation, because you can't separate what is divinely one. What is life is communion, creation is communion, but as human beings we experience separation,
Yes.
right? And so, for me, being born, the first act of my experience in the world was separation. I was rushed out of the room at my first breath. And so my mother never touched me,
Hmm.
never held me, never smelled me, never knew whether she gave birth to a boy or a girl. And so that's where the separation, I was, like that baby placed on the river. In this case, the Rio Grande River in La Tierra del Encanto, Nuevo Mexico. And I was placed really on the river of separation. And so, in that sense, in a familial sense and in a cultural sense, in a community sense, I was immediately torn from my ancestry, which, if you live as a favored person in an oppressive caste system, may not seem to mean as much to you. But when you live as the target, the absolute target of that caste system,
Mhm.
and you are separated from your ancestry, your culture, that which reflects you and affirms you, that's a trauma that is exponentially um, more intense and
Yes.
incomprehensible. Okay. And so, although I grew up with no practical means of relationship with my ancestry, at the same time, I was always filled in my being with the presence of my ancestors. They
Mhm.
always spoke to me. I was living in a human reality where nobody looked like me, nobody acted like me, nobody had the sensitivities that I did, nobody thought about the things that I did. It was just a very purposeful
Mhm.
separation to
Mhm.
shape me, to shape the clay for the task ahead. And at the same time, my ancestors, who include the Kru people of West Africa and the Balanta of West Africa and the Mende of West Africa and the Blackfeet of the Americas and the Cherokee of the Americas, my ancestors, they were always present with me. I know this now because in looking back, I can recognize that was their voice and it was a drum beat. And it wasn't that they would come and go. It was that my my devotion to their presence and voice came and went. I wandered. I
Mhm.
became lost.
Mhm.
I ignored the voices. I ignored my discernment, my intuition, my my sensitivity, my sense of what was right and what was wrong. The I neglected their counsel and their companionship
Mhm.
in my confused pain of youthfulness. And so as I grew, and there was a fateful season where I recognized I was going to either choose to heal, or I would die from the pain, right?
Mhm.
And so I just, had that kind of moment where I was looking at the grand stretch of my life ahead, and I could see what was coming if I did not change my relationship with
Mhm.
myself,
Mhm.
with my roots, right? Um, I was 18. I left New Mexico at 17 after high school. I started college and I was 18 and I was in another land far away. And I had an experience that helped bring out my first voice because I was nearly mute growing up. I
Mhm.
did not speak. It was a way to try to keep the attention off of the sin of my skin.
Mhm.
And so even at my size and my appearance, I was trying to not be seen. I was trying to hide because the gaze was not a loving gaze.
Mhm.
The white gaze was a penetrating,
Mhm.
demeaning, dehumanizing, diminishing,
Mhm.
painful gaze. And so I stifled my voice. And so when I speak of story and when I shared with you yesterday about story, for it's two things. One is that story that speaks to what our journey has been, but more than that, for me, story is about what are we telling ourselves about what our journey has been? What are we telling ourselves about our experience? What is the meaning we are harvesting? Right? When I lived in Nepal around that same age in college, I remember being out in the countryside, when we would be trekking and we were in these villages that had never seen anyone that looked like me. And I remember the women in the morning mist, bent at the waist, deep into the rice paddies. Right, they were harvesting the rice, and their ankles. The water was up to their ankles, up
Mhm.
to their skirt lines. And I just remember that vividly. The sun rising like an omen of fertility and harvest, and they would be just laboring with love for their families to bring in that nutrition, that that food. And to me, the image of that became a metaphor that stays with me about how it is for you and I and every living soul, always a choice what meaning we gather from the
Yes.
experiences of our life, what
Yes.
meaning we gather from the experiences of the world around us. So, for me, one of the choices I made in terms of the storytelling I was doing in my mind
Mhm.
was to say at some point, although the people around me who have been around me in my life are not comfortable at all with me being in relationship with my ancestors because of the
Mhm.
cultural and racial implications in a nation very sick, in a world very sick
Mhm.
relating to race and ethnicity. Um, that there was always fear that kept me from being in relation with my people,
Mhm.
which I define as those who love me, those who see me, those who do not reject any aspect of me, those who can relate to me. That is my people. So I don't define that racially or ethnically or in terms of gender or any other social construct. I just, who are the people whose hearts are oriented, completely dilated and open to receive me, to receive all of me and to be
Yes.
with me in all
Mhm.
in all that I am. Those are my people. And so I
Yes.
very slowly began to go from a painfully shy, introverted, mute person to one who intentionally was gathering the rice of his romance with himself, his romance with his people, his ancestry, and writing at about age 18 became my voice. My first
Yes.
voice was through the written word because it was more comfortable for me than this voice, which I did not know. This voice was foreign to me. When I spoke it, it would startle me. It would
Mhm.
startle me because unlike most people, I didn't have much experience with my own voice.
Mhm.
So it just, you know how maybe sometimes people will see a video recording of themselves speaking for the first time, and it takes them aback because they don't realize that they look like that they make
Yes.
those expressions, that they sound like that. It's
Mhm.
very jarring, and that's
Mhm.
how it was for me with my actual voice. But first
Mhm.
I had the written word, and it
Mhm.
helped me in that relationship with my ancestry. um, People who I knew would have no sickened feelings or ideas about my skin, my features, my
Mhm.
hair, my indigenous blackness, my experience, my pain.
Mhm.
The actual writing experience was both a storytelling, but it was also a harvesting in that morning mist of my inheritance, and it
Yes.
strengthened me. I was able to feed. I was starving for my grains of rice. You see,
Mhm.
my bowl had always been empty, and
Mhm.
I just needed affirmation.
Mhm.
I needed affirmation that I was real. My nature was valid,
Mhm.
and that I was here in the world to do a thing, to
Yes.
serve a thing, to make an offering.
Mhm.
And and I gradually began, the clouds of my confusion began to part, and I began to remember the visions I had as a small, small child, very young, visions about being in this world as love,
Yes.
as sacred love, as medicine, everywhere all at once, just being everywhere all at once, and being that offering for our healing. I saw this as a small, small child.
Mhm.
I still remember. I don't remember a lot about my childhood in some ways, but I remember these visions. They kept me up at night. And so when I say to you that I went to the desert a year ago and I wept and I was humbled, this is what I mean, is that all of that visioning from the beginning was coming to fruition.
Yes.
It has been all these years along the way manifest, but now it's really crystallizing. I feel for many of us, it's crystallizing. We're realizing, okay, like I have been in some form or fashion, we say to ourselves, being who I am and just sort of finding my way professionally, vocationally, socially, being, but now the curtain is parted, and
Yes.
and I am, I just feel like we're all kind of feeling this sense of I am now understanding the essence
Yes.
of why I am here and
Yes.
what it is that I have to offer. And so for me, this is an awesome time. And the pain erupting is a deep grief. It is a
Yes.
deep grief. And for those who are not familiar with the grief that is erupting and they look at it as a foreign thing and they can't relate and they are in perplexion, if not resentment, um, it is only because they have buried their own pain
Yes.
beneath so many layers of sediment, of denial and shame and guilt, which is required to be part of oppression. You
Yes.
must bury all of that. And so they have not been privy to the visceral beating of their own heart. And
Yes.
I feel that many such folk are being forced to feel for the
Hmm.
first time
Yes.
the actual vibration of this world.
Yes. When I hear you speak and when I first started reading your words, I firstly, it doesn't surprise me that we're sitting together. We have similar stories, let's say, let's put it that way. And I too feel the same calling and have felt it and have lived it. My life has been dedicated to it, to be this reminder, to this reminder of who we really are, and that reminder that you are worthwhile and lovable, that you are enough, that you are whole, beyond how society has conditioned you, and beyond how you have identified yourself. You are lovable and whole. And when I read your words, it's like a reminder. You're right, it stirs the soul. And just that moment when you spoke about your people, it reminded me of when I was 20. I came in to my healing. I was on death's door from addiction, and I had the choice of either not making it or changing how my relationship was with life and myself. And the beginnings of my healing began by being welcomed by people who were willing to see me, really see me, not from the conditioning of how they think I should be, but me, and to love that. And it taught me that I was lovable. And then I learned how to love myself. And in the shadow, in the pain, in the grief. And there are times when I feel enormous rage too right now. The reminder is that we are love, and that is what we're being woken up to. But we cannot live there unless we're willing to face it all and feel it all. You know, the medicine of the heart, right? I mean, that's what one of the questions I had here is, when you've been through so much oppression, when your ancestors have been through so much oppression, how do you heal the heart? How do you heal that hate and rage and pain so that you can be a space for love? I would like you to share that, because I think people need to hear that, because everybody, even those who are chosen, the chosen ones, the privileged, carry this hate and blame and justified justified anger. Like, how do you heal that so that you can be a space of compassion and love?
Wonderful, wonderful question and consideration. Thank you. I was feeling, deep emotion when you shared about having people come into your life who were willing to see you, because that was a large part of the beginning of my healing as well. As a young person, um, again, teenager essentially, for the first time in my life, people came into my life who They didn't have to say it, but I could feel it that they were not discomforted by my blackness, which is the most apparent part of me. They were not discomforted by my indigenous aura. I didn't feel I had to put it in a closet or under the bed or leave it out on the front porch or anything like that for them, that I couldn't speak about it. I couldn't speak about the pain of it. I just felt that they were willing to accept all of me. And I feel that that is a prime ingredient in the recipe for healing from generational suffering and just and slaughter and just the worst of the worst. And and I do come from lineages of slavery and genocide, from the African continent and from the American continent. These are who are in me, you know. So I'm carrying a lot of death, a lot of painful, ugly dying, a lot of horrible treatment, a lot of suffering and suffocation. And it's important for me to honor that. It's important for me to speak to it. It's important for me to hold what is not pleasant, but yet is in my bones, and not reject it. How would an infant feel if we were to reject it like that?
Yes.
Our ancestral pain is an infant. It
Yes.
If we do not cradle it and comfort it and call to it and love it, it will only do what infants do when they are neglected of what they need. It will continue to cry out louder and louder and more piercingly. And if you've been with an infant, a newborn that is just crying and crying in shrieking pain for hours, it does things to you. It begins to
Yes.
break you down. Yes? And
As
so,
a
you're yes, mom. Yes, yes. Okay, so
as a
okay,
mama,
so
I vouch for
you
that.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So you feel with me. You feel with me, right? So this is what, like, this is the kind of intensity of pain that we carry and deny and reject. And so, to your question of, how do we heal from that? For me, it's such an enticement to slide into the seductive arms of hate and resentment.
Mhm.
So easy
Oof.
when your people and you have been treated so horribly.
It's
And it
justified.
contin yeah, and it continues. Every
Yes.
day I'm having to witness the brutalization of brown bodies,
Yes.
because now we have video, and I
Mhm.
was just looking at one yesterday that just happened up the road from me, to some young people, children really,
Mm.
um, at the hands and gunpoint of people who were supposed to be protecting them.
Yes.
So we're not, I think sometimes people don't understand. We're not speaking of distant, disconnected history. We're talking about a very intimate and and broiling present. When you
Mhm.
talk about ancestral pain, we're really referring to something that is broiling in our bones right
Yes.
now, right?
Mhm.
And so, how do you heal from such a thing? I have found that there must be a dire determination
Mhm.
to live
Mm.
and to not be a destroyer in the world. And so, I always go back to the indigenous legend of the two wolves, how there is always in every soul two wolves. In every soul, the wolf of love and the wolf of hate. And
Yes.
it is the nature of the wolf to fight until death, until dominance is established. And so,
Mhm.
in an indigenous way, we ask our children, which of these wolves will win in you? And the answer is, the wolf that you feed the most. And
Mm.
so for me, I have struggled throughout my life, just like everybody else, with the temptation to give myself to hatred. I have many reasons to hate.
Yes.
I have many, many reasons to be hateful and resentful, and I can do harm. I have the potential within me to be a
Mhm.
destroyer. It's
Yes.
important for me to acknowledge that repeatedly,
Mhm.
because the moment we start to tell ourselves the story that says, I've gone to school. I've gotten my grades. I've graduated. I have degrees. I have a home. I have a job. I'm this. I'm that. I have a title. I have this and
Mhm.
that. And
I'm
we
the good
begin to tell
one.
ourselves, yeah, yeah,
I
I'm the good one. I'm the good one, right? I live in a
Yeah.
good neighborhood. I must be good.
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
the things that we tell ourselves um, to fabricate a web of goodness, a web of righteousness,
Mm.
really make us the most dangerous souls of all
Mm.
because we're not in touch with our destructive potential.
Mhm.
And that's where you see people doing things like um, calling the police on somebody, and then that person ends up being killed when they were doing nothing. They were unarmed, they were trying to live their life.
Mhm.
Now, that person in their mind who called the police has woven a story over many years and decades that I am good, I am righteous, I don't harm, everything that I have, I'm entitled to, I earned, I worked for it, I'm a good, good person. So, therefore, anytime I feel threatened, it can't be because at the root of that sense of threat, I am infected with a story that is racist or sexist or bigoted. It must be because that person who is causing me to feel threatened, there is something wrong with them. There is
Yes.
something monstrous about them, and I need to have them destroyed.
Yes.
So our stories are both, they can be both medicine for the heart, but they can also be a monstrosity builder. Our stories can be like the actual nutrition that monsters feed from. So
Yes.
we must be very, very careful with our stories. And so I go back to your question, how do we heal? For me, I can only say what has worked for me. You know, I every single day I have to examine my stories. I have to
Yes.
hold them up in the light and examine them closely, um, and ask myself, where is this story coming from? Is it coming from the love that I know I am and know I'm here for? Is it coming from my original nature before this world started to harm me? Before I started to harm myself? Or is this story coming from my fear, my flight, my ego, my panic, my insecurity, my trauma, my bruise? Is it coming from my ugliness? Where is it coming from? What does the
Yes.
story serve? Where is the story going to take me? If you know that a river, it might be an attractive river with crystal clear water and the sun is shining on it and the tall grass is waving around it, dancing, and it looks like this a wonderful, picturesque utopia, and you want to just jump in the river because it's a hot summer day. But if you know that river is going to eventually lead you to a waterfall, and that waterfall will plummet you into a toxic cesspool
Mhm.
where you will be poisoned and polluted. If you know this, then even if that river upstream is clear and enticing, then you might want to pause and take a deep breath and consider, should I jump in this river? And that
Yes.
is my practice. It's a daily practice as far as me pausing aside the stories that emerge up in me. And I have to question, do I want to jump in that water, that river, because it's a strong current and it may sweep me before I know it into a poisonous pool. And so
Mhm.
I ask myself, why are you here? What are you here to be polluted with harm so that you can then do harm, or are you here to learn how to wash your spirit clean
Yes.
and be an example of that for those who don't know how to wash their spirit clean? And what aura do you want to leave behind? What do you want to leave as an endowment for other living things?
Yes.
So the work involves for me a lot of intentional breathing. It involves a lot of time in the wilderness, away from human voices and influence,
Mhm.
because living things, plants and sky and animals and water and breeze for me are not only medicine, they are role models and teachers for how to
Yes.
be at peace. Yeah. So I like this, they show me over and over, hey bro, man, this is how we do peace. I
Yes.
can't speak for you. I don't want to say how you're doing, but this is how we do peace. So,
Yes.
you know,
I was walking in the park the other day and I was really feeling it all. And I just looked at this incredible tree and I looked at the trunk of the tree and I was like, gosh, you really know how to be. Like that tree knows how to be a tree. It's being a tree. And how are we messing this up so much as human beings? Like to when I'm with nature, I'm reminded of how simple how they teach me how to be, how to come back to being.
how to be
Yes.
humans, the human beings that we are so lost from knowing how to be. So
Yes.
we are not being. For me, indigenous, this concept, this construct is about being in relation with all things all at
Yes.
once. This is
Yes.
what it is. The primacy of relationship over profit, over product, over greed, over accumulation and hoarding, over hyper individualism. It's the
Mhm.
primacy of relationship. And I
Yes.
feel that we increasingly are disconnected from our teachers, wilderness, creation that daily can show us how to be. Instead,
Yes.
we immerse ourselves in relationships with actual technology vibrating at a frequency that creates in us depression, anxiety, stress, loneliness.
Mm.
Um, we're not vibrating at our natural frequency. We're not vibrating at the frequency of trees, of breeze. We're vibrating at the frequency of disease,
Yes.
dis-ease. A
Yes.
phone is dis-ease. It is not in a state of ease. It is dis-ease. Things
Yes.
vibrating around us, electronically and digitally are in a state of dis-ease. And so, again, to your question, I know for me, it's important to make sure that ideally, the majority of my time should be spent in the presence of energy that is healthy energy, healthy vibration, um, that has roots to it. And so, that's a big part of the healing for me. Also, to make sure I am bleeding and crying every day for me through poetry, through writing, through spoken word, through loving people. If I see
Yes.
a young person on the street or in a store checking out at working the cashier's booth, here is an opportunity for me to not only be kind to that young person and offer to them medicine of love and warmth and affection and seeing them that they don't get from us as adults enough. It's also my opportunity to bless my own self by letting that river run. If our rivers aren't running continuously like that, they
Hmm.
become silted, they become stagnant, they become stale, and the
Yes.
breeding ground for more dis-ease. So love is a daily practice that is
Yes.
not as easy as it seems on the surface,
Mm-mm.
right? It's not fluffy. It's not cotton candy. It is
Hmm.
arduous
Yes.
labor in the broiling sun when your back is aching. It's that moment where you have a chance to be ugly and hurtful or just cold and distant, or you can risk opening your heart and letting that river come through, and both you and that other soul are fed by that. And so
Yes.
I just feel, we will not heal until collectively, until we are willing to weave stories that are true instead of stories that are propaganda that serve to perpetuate the status quo of
Yes.
our unwellness.
Yes. There was something in your book that I read that I felt was so aligned with what I also speak about. That We're waiting for permission to be a revolutionary. We're waiting for someone to come along and either be the revolutionary or for them to give us permission. But we need to be giving ourselves that permission and then making that choice to be the revolutionary. And that is not going out and fighting battles, showing up every day with that kind of intention that freedom becomes more important than the story. Freedom becomes more important than winning and the fight. And I say that to the people and the women I work with, the power that you're looking for is not out there. You are it. And but you have to choose every day to be the one to heal, to bring healing at the forefront of your life and the way that you live your life. And I wish everyone on this planet knew that they already have what they need. That they are the ones that they're looking for.
Yes. 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 This is our so there's a graduation stage that is just before us as humanity. And the graduation is to move from that baby bird helplessness and dependency that we've been living in for centuries to graduate um, ourselves to that place of ascertaining, accepting, embracing, and activating, manifesting the sun inside of us, the
Yes.
sun that is our soul, the solar power, SOUL, the solar power that we have to transform all living things. And we
Mhm.
are at the precipice of that. We're being pushed to the ledge, right? The
Yes.
edge of a cliff, a tall cliff. In other words, if we do not grasp the mantle of duty and responsibility and accountability to
Mm.
be that revolution and that
Mhm.
revolutionary,
Mhm.
then it is pretty obvious. I think it is growing obvious for more and more of us that the consequence of not claiming that mantle is our demise.
Yes. I had to sit with that. I had to sit with that fully in my heart about 2 weeks ago when I really let it in, the reality. Just as much the possibility that we will rise, there is a possibility that we could not make it. And I had to allow myself to let that in. Otherwise, I can't really do my work. That you have to let in the possibility of both. Otherwise, we're still living in the fantasy of one day, someday, it'll happen. It has to
Yes,
happen now.
yes, there you go, there you go. That's another story banging on the window and banging on the door, asking us to let it in. The story of truth, and the story of truth includes the possibility of extinction, the possibility of destruction. The story of truth is banging on the door, and it wants in, and we have to let it in. Because if we don't let it in, we will not be filled with the urgency in our marrow,
Mhm.
the urgency
Mm.
to heal, the urgency to do what it takes, yeah, by any means necessary to release ourselves from this old bondage, this way of life, this desiccation of the sacred, this sorrow song, this fraudulent ceremony. It is an urgency that we must breathe and we must bleed.
Yes.
And not an urgency in the sense of creating panic and stress and anxiety, but I mean a dutiful urgency, one of faith, bred of a certainty that we do have the power within us. And so it's a condition, it's an atmospheric condition we need to achieve that we have struggled with thus far in our history, well, in our modern materialistic, capitalistic, greed-based history. But it
Mhm.
is a condition, a weather system within us that certainly we can achieve. It's in us, and we have ancestral remnants and artifacts of that. When you or I achieves a moment of peace
Mhm.
on a certain day, it's because somewhere in our lineage One of our people achieved a moment of peace as well, and that became embedded in their actual DNA expression, and it was offered down to us so that we have the potentiality to flip that code switch into peace.
Yes.
It doesn't come from out that peace doesn't come from out here.
Mhm,
We were already constructed with us.
mhm,
The As Rumi said in another of his verses, all of the seeds are in your barn. Like
mm,
what is it that you are wanting to grow of this world? Whatever that is, whatever that bountiful, plentiful feast is, the seeds, all of the seeds are already in your barn. They're already inside you. Peace,
mhm,
tranquility, serenity, compassion, empathy, sensitivity, love, endurance, resilience, hope, kindness, gentleness, tenderness, authenticity, genuinity. I don't know if that's even a word, but I just made it one. Genuineness, the ability to be real, which we've lost so much. All of these things are seeds that are already in us, and they were planted and tended by people before us. And not even just, I'm not just speaking of blood lineage. I mean, just the, people who lived before us planted these seeds and tended them so that we could have, this, what do you call that? This legacy harvest. We have all these seeds. We
yes.
have all these seeds. We have
So
them.
before we round up this interview for Soul Surgery, I wanted to bring the attention to Soul Water Rising, which is your organization that I think it's been open since 2001. Is that right? That's a long time. And I'm so moved by the work that you're doing for children and for youths, vulnerable youths. You call it rehumanizing mission. I'd actually never heard that phrase before I started looking at your work. And of course it's rehumanizing because it's for those that have been dehumanized, they have not been given the opportunity to be human, fully human, all of their humanness. And I'm concerned about the children. I'm concerned about the next generation and what we are going to leave them behind and how we can help them today. So, how can we help? How can we contribute to the next generation? Of course, everything we've been speaking about in our own healing, but how can we talk to our children? How can we help our children today?
Thank you, Nikki. Man, so again, you are touching on a vital, tender place for us. And so I'll go back and to answer you. I'm reflecting on what you just said about soul water rising. So for me, it's that the words came to me as they usually do, just from spirit in a moment. Soul water rising, and I don't. For me, it's never been an organization. It's just the soul water rising is the spirit of um, my life and my offering, my servitude, and I started as a dehumanized. Like, I'm intimately acquainted with what it feels like to be dehumanized by everybody, by family, by friends, by society. And so for me, those children who were similarly um, touched by experience with homelessness, houselessness, poverty, foster care, um, migration,
Mhm,
refugee experience, violation, trafficking, mental health, stigmatization, marginalization, you know, the children labeled as at risk and, um, out of control and without promise, without future. All these children, my love affair has been with them because they are me. And I see in them, so much beauty, and they have blessed me. They have rained down their glory on my hard ground, and they have softened my soil. And I owe everything. I owe everything to them. They kept me alive. Just souls that I would, meet or be privileged to be in the presence of, and through the work or just personally, and they've really kept me living. They've been what do you call that, life um, sustaining system. Um, and so as I live, I continue to see more and more clearly that all of our children have been dehumanized because of the dehumanizing culture that was grown and fostered and cultivated in this country and other countries, the country that you're in. Many countries were the original cultivators of this dehumanizing,
Yes.
individualistic, materialistic, greed oriented, colonialistic um, way of being, where you just simply dismiss and disregard the sacredness of things, and you just take and you
Yes.
kill and you destroy and you steal, and then you call things yours,
Mm.
and you build gates and walls around that. And so what that has done to all children is to dehumanize them, because a child comes into the world a hummingbird, a fragile, delicate, fluttering thing. And that hummingbird just wants to land softly and gently and safely, and to sing and to
Mm.
sing. And we have harmed the song and the singing instrument inside of our children, so that they struggle now. My daughter is just turned 22.
Mm.
I see it in her. I see it in her generation, her peers, her friends. I
Mm.
see it in younger children. I see it for me, I'm at a point now where I look upon, a 30-year-old, and I see a child. But I see that child in all ages of us.
Yes.
I see the dehumanized child in 60 and 70 year olds. I
Yes.
see it in all ages. I see that we have done a frightening thing to the child in
Mm.
us, because that child comes from the spirit world, and its nature is to be sensitive, to feel, to to quiver in the web of life, the
Yes.
web of life, the web of life, of living things, to quiver in that web, that sensitive web. That's what a child is designed and constructed for. And what we've done is we have suppressed their vibrational ability. So they all of a sudden they graduate from high school, but they don't know how to be human. They don't know how to be a living thing. They don't know how to feel. Feeling is overwhelming for them and
Mm.
terrifying for them. And so
Mm.
they do what we always did, which is to find ways to numb themselves. And
Yes.
so the cycle continues. And so how
Yes.
do we provide a healing support for our children? I look at it as a gardener does, again, as how do you get plants to thrive in an environment that is harsh and not suitable for them, for their survival? You create a greenhouse, and in that greenhouse you can control the temperature and the sunlight and the soil nutrients to allow those plants to grow and thrive. We need to create greenhouse spaces for our children. They need to be spaces really for all of us, but they are spaces for gathering, they are spaces for sacred storytelling, for weeding out and purging toxic storytelling, spaces for our children to have voice, to we send them through formal education, which again, as a cultural creature, that system snuffs out the soul in them. And then we wonder why they suffer from depression and anxiety. So,
Mm.
to at least supplement their formal educational process, if we're not going to change the culture of that, we must create other spaces and rites of passage that allow them to be who they are, so they don't have to come to a classroom and sit still and muffle themselves and leave who they are outside of the school. They must have spaces available that we are endorsing as adults, endorsing as role models, showing them that we are creating and using spaces like that for ourselves as well, spaces of creativity and vitality, spaces of revolution, spaces where children can run amok and be wild. They can scream and yell and cry and bleed and play and climb and fall and dance and sing and be that hummingbird and feel safe to flutter where they are called to flutter and inspired to flutter, and they can land on the flowers of human hearts that are open. This is our responsibility. This is our
Yes.
duty. We have to create these spaces. We have to endorse them and say that if you step into this space and spend time in this space, we will not punish you. We will not judge you. We will not scold you. We will not criticize you. We will encourage you to be in the space that feels to you like home, like freedom, like a meadow open that feels like the sky. And we have to give them the we have to give them what is already their entitlement, their true sacred entitlement, which is for them to have visions for the spaces that they need and for them to create them. So when I say we need to create, what I really mean as adults, we need to endorse their own creativity because
Yes.
they will create the spaces. They will
Mhm.
create the spaces. They will paint over all the bland walls that we have constructed. They will open windows that we have closed and new draft will bring in fresh air. They will take off the roof and let the sky in. They will do things that are wild and rambunctious, but we need to stop stifling them with our
Yes.
own fear. It's
Mm.
and our fear again is very old generational trauma, and that's how it speaks.
Yes.
That's how it speaks. And so soul water rising to me is simply us, you and I, us grown folk, every day asking the question, what can I do to help the soul water rise
Yes.
so that it doesn't feel like such a drought for our children or for any of us? And that book, I don't know if we ever mentioned the title of it that you have been kindly sharing about, but it is freedom. The name is freedom, medicine words for your brave revolution. So freedom is an important prize for us to keep our eyes on for our children, not conformity or acceptability, but freedom, which is it's a wild thing. And
Hmm.
then medicine words, words that heal, and brave revolution. It requires courage to revolt, to overthrow your oppressor, even especially if that oppressor is yourself,
Yes.
especially if it is yourself. It requires a lot of courage, and courage is a river that's fed by the underground spring of love. And so we have to stay connected to that current.
Thank you. That is the most beautiful and powerful way to finish this exceptional interview. Thank you so much. How can my listeners find you? How can they support Soul Water Rising? Please share with us.
Thank you, Nikki. So, part of my own growth into freedom and from the scar tissue of oppression is to allow myself to do what you just asked. Like there's an uncomfortable part for me about feeling like I don't want to be soliciting anything or asking of anything. But it's part of that journey just for me to be able to say, listen, if I have this calling, I need to give it a fair opportunity to breathe. And you do
Yes.
that by letting people know. And so, the website, I guess I would always say that all of their questions, or at least the beginning um, answer to those questions, they can just find at my website, which is just my name, jaiyajohn.com, JAIYAJOHN, jaiyajohn.com. All of my books are there. The books are
Hmm.
available everywhere books are sold, but they can start there if they want just to acquaint themselves. I have other material there. I'm always putting writing and other material there. They can reach me. I share medicine words every day on Instagram. That's the one
Yes.
social space that I feel comfortable enough with the spirit of. that I do share offerings there daily, so they can find me there. The handle is just Jaiya John, and that's on Instagram. They can reach out to me anytime, whether it's through Instagram, through an email. I'm always blessed to hear from people. I do my best to respond,
Mhm.
to the blessed deluge that comes in. And I don't know if I'm leaving something else out. You can remind me, but
All the details. I'm going to make sure that all the details are at the bottom of this episode for people to be able to find and click those links. And your book, Freedom Medicine Words for Your Brave Revolution, is being sold right now, and it is it is medicine. And so I thank you for being courageous enough to share that love with us. And thank you for coming here today. I'm so grateful you said yes to me. I I feel like it was an honor, and that we have been leaving prayers here. So thank you so much.
Nikki, thank you. It's always mutual. I believe that. So you were the second person in 20 plus years that I said yes to, and but I should say I want to say it's entirely because of your spirit, your heart, your aura. I have to discern these things, and you just
Mm,
felt right. You felt safe.
mm,
You felt genuine, and so I'm grateful for your aura. I'm grateful for the journey you've been on and the labor you've done, the healing work, all of it. I'm grateful for your pain and your
mm,
sorrow. I'm grateful for all your difficult moments that you moved through. I'm very, very cherishing, of who you are and your presence amongst us. And so thank you for
mm.
this moment with you. Thank you for this sharing, this breaking of bread and soul.
Thank
Thank you.
you. Thank you. And so that completes our episode with Dr. Jaiya John. If you want to learn more from Jaiya, follow his work, support his work, you can find him on Instagram. You can find him on his website. All the details will be in the introductory notes to this episode. And if you found this episode useful, if you had any big aha moments, please do share them with me. You can get hold of me on Instagram. You can email me at nikki@nikkiclinch.com. And please do share this work with your friends, your loved ones, and anyone that you feel needs to hear this today. And as support for the Soul Surgery podcast, please do leave me a review. The more you support, the more we can spread these teachings, which is so important today. And for those of you that want to enjoy the extra content that I create on every single episode for Soul Surgery, please head over to my private membership community, The Awakening Collective. The Awakening Collective is a community for all those willing and ready to gather together to live with a mutual intention and commitment to live at a higher level of consciousness and integrity, and to do it together, to heal together during this time. So, if you want to enjoy that very, very special extra content, please do head over to the Awakening Collective. Details will be in the introductory notes. That brings us to a close for today. I thank you so much for listening, and I wish you a beautiful day.